Eek, 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 eek. Hello, Ospreys. Hello, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff_2020, and we are so excited once again to have our trio back together. This is really a thrilling event for me to bring Professor Hamamoto and George Webb back to the show and share their updates as well as kind of mix it up with them and see what we come up with. It's you never know really what we're gonna be talking about until we get started. But in order to do that, hang on just a second, and I'll get my connection straight up here. Alrighty, and introduce both of you at the same time tonight. On the left, Professor Hamamoto. On the right, George Webb. Good evening, guys.
Good evening, John. Hi, George. How you doing?
Great. It's an honor and a privilege as always. Thank you, guys. I can't wait to see what we talk about tonight.
All right. Before we begin, I had a question for both of you gentlemen. Did you hear about Jeffrey Toobin being fired by the New Yorker? He's an attorney by training, and he's an expert commentator, I think, on CNN and other legacy media. He was accused of spanking the monkey during a Zoom session.
Oh, I remember that. That was a couple weeks ago, yeah.
Right. So they launched an internal investigation, and they convicted him, and he had to separate from the New Yorker. So, John, all I can say is that I'm quite relieved that we're not on Zoom. We are on Skype.
Yeah, and I don't think they need to worry about us with any of those, monkey tricks.
All right.
But
Stay put.
I think Jeffrey Toobin is just sort of a metaphor for what this legacy media and their the people they're supporting, what they're really about, aren't they? It's just sort of emblematic.
Well, I saw Jeff a lot. He went a lot to the Roger Stone trial, and he was always there, and he was always writing a Roger Stone story. And I always saw him a little bit tongue-in-cheek there. It always seemed like he was going to write the story that how bad Trump was to be associated with Roger Stone, and it just seems like these people are school play characters, and all written for us to be excited and mad at each other about, and never gets at the people that are doing the Belt and Road deal. You know what I mean? It's always about Jeff Toobin spanking his monkey. It's never about Hunter Biden traveling up and down the Belt and Road at kind of a patsy for Warren Buffett.
Well, this is why I mentioned it, get it out of the way. I wanted to underscore what George Webb has been arguing for the past 4 going on 5 years, and that's think networks, think systems first, pattern analysis, connect the data points. Personalities come second, if at all. I mean, you can hold them at the same time, but it's really about the deep network that we're talking about. And I think I figured out what happened back in the 1960s or 50s. Legacy media and the people that own it, you know about Mockingbird Media, figured that personalities and school plays and hair-pulling contests is the perfect means of distracting the American public from substantive political issues. And toward that end, they recruited a mafiosi by the name of Generoso Pope, and they helped set up the National Enquirer. This is the paper that my mother used to buy weekly at the grocery checkout stand. And then when the celebrity culture really got underway in the late 70s to the 1980s, British intelligence exported 2 of their assets. One, Anna Wintour, right, a magazine person. She's with Condé Nast. She's rumored to be leaving pretty soon. And the other, of course, being Tina Brown, getting involved with high fashion, haute couture, and the larger Fleet Street style celeb culture they exported to America. And this is one of the reasons why you see a lot of Five Eyes and British commentators on American television. More, I mean, they're way overrepresented there. So I just wanted to underscore that, George. You're right on target.
Well, I'm always interested in what books you're going to bring in, and it's always scholarly and it's always just amazing. And I agree with you on the whole panoply of people you're talking about, which are just kind of these, I don't want to say British rogue agents, but gosh, they're awfully close to that if they're not. Just these Five Eyes cutouts that are made, they're just kind of sprinkled in front of us to upset us, to inflame us, to get us into these fights over nothing rather than the substantive issues.
Mm-hmm. Well, just as you had earlier discussed the cabal, the U.S.-Mexico cabal, more recently you have brought into focus, which is very important because I've always claimed that the Commonwealth of Canada is very much an enemy of the U.S. It's supposed to be these friendly, nice people. And I'm not talking about Canadians in general. I'm just talking about the historical relationship between going back to the Revolutionary War to present. But I think most recently, and I want to, again, underscore this, I think it's an important find on your part, George, is that you brought to the fore the U.S.-Canada border cabal with the claimed movement of ballots from Canada over the border into Detroit.
Yeah,
and previous to that, of course, the Blackberries, which is another Canadian company. So we are seeing certain patterns here. Maybe it's not the southern border we should be worried about. It could be the northern border that's more problematic.
Yeah, John, I don't know if I'm stepping on your line here, but we've done a lot of work on Warren Flood and saying for 6 weeks it's going to come in Detroit. It's going to come where Warren Flood works. Dave Underdown literally has been saying it's going to be in Cobo Hall, which is this TCF center. It's going to be with a red Ferrari. It's going to be with this Walgreens girl who spent $100,000 in upholstery upgrades on her Ferrari. That's where it's going to come. I mean, we've gotten into stitching patterns on the Ferrari and what Ferrari Warren Flood is going to drive in with the 138,000 ballots. Every ballot for Joe Biden. And when you predict this stuff 6 weeks in advance, and then it happens in front of your eyes, I just had to look back and say to Dave Underdown, Dave, how could you have known that? How could you have known not only it was Warren Flood, not only it was going to be the red Ferrari, not only it was going to be the red Ferrari with the $100,000 Vatican Bank stitching pattern. I'm agog at how good the analysis has been with the Neighborhood News Hour, Neighborhood News Studio now. You're exactly right. If I use a foreign intelligence agency to flip an election, the easiest one to go for is the one that's 2 miles away across the Detroit River in Windsor, Canada. And then they're in Waterloo, which is less than 50 miles away, is where the Blackberries are made. So you're so right on with your analysis, Doctor. It's the easiest reach is right across the border, 2 miles to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guys, I've been studying the LaRouche PAC angle on all this stuff, and the two NSA whistleblowers, Bill Benny and Kirk Wiebe. In particular, Kirk Wiebe gave a kind of a lecture, almost a college course in how the hammer and the scorecard work, which I repeated on my show today and discussed with that in mind, and also with Dr. Shiva's statistical analysis of various counties in Michigan, looking like there was some kind of an algorithm applied. Kirk Wiebe mentioned that he identified in his show 5 different ways of cheating and how they were all applied. One of them is the Dominion, which involves a program inside the voting machine itself. The hammer and scorecard is from the hammer in Fort Washington, George, that you and I went and investigated about a year and a half or 2 years ago, and I wish we still had that video to show, because it's very pertinent now. People have no idea where it was, but we drove right by there, and you made a video. Anyway, that's just to say there's an awful lot of different approaches as to what kind of fraud it is, or how maybe there's all 5 different, including, stuffing the ballot boxes is one, the Dominion thing is one, and what's the other one? False logons, false credentials into the counting machine to log in that way. Well, of all these things, it seems to me that there's enough expertise here to put together a court hearing if one needed to try the case. And I'm thinking a lot of these things are issues of fact that actually should be decided by a jury and not just by a judge. And that's going to take a year or more to line up a jury trial. So we may be in an emergency situation where we need to just go straight to the Supreme Court and say, hey, January 20th is right around the corner, and we need to wrap this up right now and not drag it out. Well, anyway, I'd appreciate, George, your thoughts on that. And also, in my chat room, a lot of people made references to you having had some previous comments about Dennis Montgomery, who is the source of Kirk Wiebe's discussion this morning. He says that this guy Montgomery was talked to him and then got put under a gag order. I don't know if you have any recollection of that name or not, but anyway, any clarification you could add to what I've just said would be great.
Well, Kirk to death. I've talked to him many times over 4 years. A wonderful person. He worked with Bill Binney, obviously, at the NSA. The whole crew that were a part of the NSA whistleblowers. They're amazing. But I think Kirk doesn't know the full background of Dennis Montgomery as being a shill for Dick Cheney, for Paul Wolfowitz. This, again, remember Dick Cheney and Paul Wolfowitz. Who is there to go into the car dealership in Falls Church, Virginia, with Imran Awan? Who is their man? It's Alatar. Okay.
Yeah.
So you have to remember that people are presented. I love Kirk to death, and he is the definition of a great patriot. But people will be pushed in front of you that have seemingly true information that later will turn out to be, oh my God, that's Cheney's shill. And you have to be on guard. Now, everything he says about Dominion and the backdooring of Dominion and all that, and, if you want to talk about Nancy Pelosi's chief of staff with Dominion, which is Nadim El-Shami, all that stuff I'm not discounting at all. But I think they're hiding Nadim El-Shami, and they're pushing forward, this guy, Dennis Montgomery, again, just like they did before. This person here is a spy, and he's a spy on everyone in Congress. And I can't remember, I think it's 20,000 unmaskings that he did with the 47 hard drives and all the deep dives he did and unmaskings he did for Dick Cheney. So this is a person who's a spy for Dick Cheney. And what we really want to get to is El-Shami. El-Shami is the man that is used here in this system. But having said that, I think the a opening or a judicial review of the Dominion system is certainly appropriate right now.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't mention the hammer and the scorecard. Is that because you feel that those are a throw, or is it because you feel that they exist but they're not as described by Kurt Wiebe per Dennis Montgomery?
No, I think Kirk is right on both of those. I think he's right on hammer, and I think he's right on scorecard. But I just think the attribution is false because he's been given that as the attribution, and he doesn't know about El Shami. As soon as you know about El Shami, everything becomes clear with Nancy Pelosi. But I love Kirk Wiebe. He's a wonderful person, but every time you bring in Dennis Montgomery, I know it's a throw. Like I say, I go back a long way with Dennis Montgomery, all the way back in 2002 in Kirkland, Washington, on the shores of Lake Washington there in Kirkland with the National Oceanic Administration boats. So, and I won't go into that right now with Raytheon and Lockheed, but I'm just saying I know who he is, and I don't think Kirk has the depth of background that I have with him. But if Kirk has more than I do, wonderful. I do think I'm agreeing with Kirk that it does require a judicial review. I'm agreeing with him wholeheartedly on that.
Well, I don't want to let it go, George, because I'm kind of really interested in the hammer aspect of it. And if we just take the name of Dennis Montgomery out of it and say, maybe we've got the wrong name of the whistleblower, maybe that guy's a cover or a throw or whatever. But the content of what Kurt is saying this morning about this is a supercomputer that was designed to fight the war on terror and to take over systems in foreign countries so that we could control their elections, and that James Clapper and John Brennan made a illegal copy of this program and have then been able to use that as a weapon in our elections, and that this part of it seems to me to be far more important than whether Dennis Montgomery is or is not a reliable person. So I didn't want to leave it without just let's confirm whether or not, in your opinion, George, the hammer and the scorecard as described by Kirk is a real fraud that either is in play or could easily be in play if we have enough evidence.
Absolutely. It begs judicial review, and if Kirk sees smoke there, then there is fire. Absolutely. I just want to caution everybody that if Dennis Montgomery is your fact witness, it's going to go to Cheney and it's going to go nowhere. But if you walk it down to where it's actually going, like you were saying, in Fort Washington, the Navy Supercomputer Center there, the illegal unmasking for Cheney, that's the right direction to go. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks, George. I appreciate that. Yes, Professor.
Yes, George, on this cautionary principle, I wanted to ask you a question about Representative Devin Nunes. Now, maybe I'm reading more into it, but I got the sense that you have a more jaundiced opinion or overview of Representative Nunes. I mean, he was made out to be the hero of the documentary by Amanda Milius, right? The War Against the President. He came off very well, and his assistant. But what do you know about Representative? And you mentioned the fact that this 20-year-old assistant or wherever walks in, and everybody seems to know who she is within this universe of Devin Nunes. What do you know about him that might help me or help us understand this movie, which I thought was excellent? Maybe I was overestimating it.
No, I think Amanda Milius's movie is a great movie. This is the plot to kill the president or plot to get the president or whatever the name of the movie is. Mm-hmm. That Duke knows her very well, and he's close to her. and it's a good movie. And I don't want to discount Devin Nunes or anything like that. I just think that we all tend to have these ideas that these people are beyond compromise, they're beyond reproach, they're our heroes, they're always going to be working and fighting and punching for us. Okay, and then you get to Capitol Hill, and then you go there every day with Task Force, my dead research partner, and you find that they're not punching and hammering away like you want them to be. We sat in his office, I can't count how many times, and over 100, trying to give him information. And it seemed like he was very much a limited hangout. And I don't mean to criticize him, but it was always a little bit, land a couple of punches, but then he would back away. And, Kash Patel was the new guy who's now in at the Pentagon, and he's like number 3 at the Pentagon now. And he's in the movie. He's featured quite heavily in the movie. And why are all these DIA informant guys? There's like 12 of them in the movie. There's no English speaking. Put it this way: there's no Americans in the movie. They're all DIA guys and gals with great British accents in this movie. And you wonder, is this just yet another school play? They're going to be the guys that are going to try to go get them. They're going to go get them. We're going to go get the bad guys. They're always going to come up about 80% short. They're always going to give you a whiff of the fact that they get to some blood, to the swamp and to the bad guys, right? And then you're going to give them the money. You're going to send them the money, and then they're never going to quite get there. And that's the frustration I kept coming back with over and over again with Devin Nunes. And there you have it. I mean, I said it, but there.
No, thank you for unpacking that. That's important information. It's a reminder to us that it's the citizen journalists and the activists that are going to keep the pressure up. It really falls back to us like it should, not our so-called representatives, even though they may come off very nicely in this documentary. And Kash Patel, I didn't realize he had floated so high into the Pentagon ranks. I think he himself could be a problem now and into the future.
Well, Trump is going out, right? And that's at least the thinking on Capitol Hill. But yet Kash Patel was the guy who was supposedly the Trump, crusader, right, with Devin Nunes, is a star rising. He's in the ascent. So how could that be if he didn't do what the deep state wanted him to do? I mean, if you would think it through, you'd say, well, the Trump people are going out, and then, in come the Biden people. And it's not that way. It's the people who do the limited hangouts and the people who play the game for the deep state that give this appearance that they're on the hunt, and never quite get there, never quite even get even close. They're the ones that get promoted. Why is that? So
he was rewarded then, just like the FBI person who helped stage the fake threats against the governor of Michigan got a promotion recently at FBI.
Yeah, you see this over and over again. It's like we have the left actors and we have the right actors, and it's sort of like a Hamilton, where everyone gets on there and sings together about how much they hate each other, but there's never any clashing or gnashing of teeth. We're all expected to pay tremendous amounts of money for the seat to sit there and watch this, and nothing ever happens. It's just the changing the guard, and the people who are supposedly the crusaders are rewarded. Kash Patel has been rewarded in the DOD. So I had some real problems with it. I remember watching the video with Peter Duke, and I had some real problems with it. It's like these guys didn't get to any blood. They didn't even get their gloves off. And we went way farther, way deeper. 3 years ago, and they basically took what we did, what Task Force and I did, and took the white gloves off and did a little smack across the face with the white gloves on the deep state, and very frustrating. And Task Force was the most frustrated going into Devin Nunes's office, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for explaining for that on that topic. Now, I sent both of you a 2006 report that was issued by the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. And we're hearing about the election being primarily about fraud or we was robbed. What about making it a civil rights issue? Because if the left liberal people complain about it, you can come back and say, well, what's wrong? Are you against civil rights? Or what's the problem here? The optics look better. I think if it became a civil rights issue, made it blown up. Even if they don't do anything, make it a civil rights issue instead of just one of cheating and fraud. What do you think about that approach to break the deadlock?
I'll let John whack at that.
Well, I have an immediate answer, which is just what you were just talking about, George. Is that the ACLU, is set up to be that lightning rod that everybody would run to in situations where civil rights are being violated. They've got a reputation, they've got a great history of litigation, and it looks like the right name in the phone book when you're saying I've got a civil rights problems. I'm going to call the ACLU. But the ACLU, for all of its huge presence everywhere, does not seem to be all that concerned about things like the Second Amendment, things like the rights of free speech, and I don't think that they would take up the cause at all. So what you'd be doing would be to try to put out a flag that says I'm here for civil rights, but the elephant in the room, the ACLU, is not going to be marching alongside of you. That is part of the whole overall strategy, where you have people in all of these areas. It's just like the secret team. It's like the focal point idea of Alan Dulles puts a person in every agency of the federal government, so if he needs something, he needs some special tires for his jet, he knows exactly who's going to get it for him without having to run through the bureaucracy. This is in our corporations as well. It's in all the foundations as well. So I think it's in the ACLU as well. So how does one rise above the cacophony of these well-established things? I mean, don't even get started on things like the World Wildlife Fund, which is such a fraud, and people don't understand it. But that's my answer is, I'd love to make it a civil rights. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, slow me down. But I'd be marching on the freedom land with you if we could own that label. I don't know. It's something that we might end up having to try. Guys, there's too much at stake in this election. There's just too much at stake. That's one thing I think people are losing sight of, is how dark the vision is if Joe Biden is seated in the White House.
I think I look at election operations, and I look at intelligence organizations and intelligence operations, and I look at counterintelligence. And so I don't see myself in any political milieu. You know what I mean? I look at myself and I say, who are the operatives going to be? What are they going to do? And how do you prevent them or expose them for doing what they're doing? So we focus on Warren Flood, the Microsoft cover, Detroit, Cobo Arena, the intelligence connections to CSIS for Warren Flood and so forth, and we look and say, if you conspire with the Foreign Intelligence Agency and you even get one vote that way, one vote, it's a treasonous act. So I'm not in the adding things up column. I'm in the McDuff column, which is your father did counterintelligence, and your father looked at undue influence and infiltration into the United States, into our political scheme. And I see that. And if as soon as you see that, you have to throw up all the red flags. You have to stop everything and say, we need a total and full accounting. It doesn't matter if it takes 6 months. I agree. I would love to be more expeditious to keep the transition of power. But when I see a foreign intelligence actor, and my God, John, we looked at it for 6 weeks and we couldn't believe it that it would happen there. We predicted it would happen at Cobo Arena. We said it would be a red Ferrari. Dave Underdown said it would be the $100,000 Vatican Bank upholstery upgrade to the Ferrari that would come in. We don't know if Warren Flood drove that Ferrari for whoever came in, the Walgreens or whoever it was. But I mean, that is unsettling, that our election would come down and Michigan would be determined by whoever would drive a red Ferrari in after the polls were closed at Cobo Arena, after the Republican challengers were told to go home. We now have in this new Trump lawsuit dozens of affidavits saying people were locked out. They were told to go home. They said, this is it. We're done with counting, and then rolled the red Ferrari. So we have blood on the sword here. This isn't something we're concocting. This needs to be addressed by a tribunal or a judge. We have a smoking gun here of interference by a foreign intelligence organization in our country's elections in a key swing state. And I think we're going to find the same things. We were in Michigan at the time, but I think we're going to find the same thing in these other 5 states.
Mm-hmm. Now, George, you mentioned that, I think it was earlier this week, that it only takes one proven case of a compromise taking place. It doesn't take a number of people or thousands of votes, just one. So what's frustrating about it is how come we can't even get to that one case, that one specific smoking gun incident? What are the forces that are arrayed against us that prevent that one case from being put forth into a court of law?
Well, this Trump lawsuit that finally came out yesterday, or this morning, I was alerted to it with Cassandra Fairbanks's article. We were waiting all week for it. There is affidavits out the wazoo on this. So this isn't. There was the Great Lakes Justice Center that put out a nice, it was kind of like a law review article saying here are all the laws that would be broken if we had evidence, but they didn't have any affidavits. And I was livid. I was like, oh great, nice little law discussion, parlor discussion, but where are the affidavits? And then I flipped out yesterday because there was no affidavits. And then today, now in comes all the affidavits. So dozens. And so I don't think this is something that can be ignored anymore. And I think Trump is on very solid ground here in Michigan. So I compare it to Bush v. Gore. Al Gore thought he was president of the United States for 37 days. Joe Biden has thought he was president of the United States for about 8 days. You can think you're president and not be president. And so far, Al Gore's 30 days ahead of Joe Biden. And it is going to be determined by a court. And I do think this thing ends up in the Supreme Court.
Guys, can I just put in I guess this is my big gross wrap my arms around everything theory of the night. And I'd love to hear your reaction to it. But the National Security Act of 1947 and the creation of the CIA, we all know the history. We know that the CIA was created only as an intelligence coordinator for the president and the National Security Council that was created by that law. And we all know that due to one or two little weasel words that they stuck in it, that the CIA was able to sustain the idea that it was, in fact, entitled to do operations as well as collect intelligence. Well, that was Allen Dulles' theory, and it worked because President Eisenhower didn't object to it. And he, a lot of times, didn't even know the specifics anymore of what was going on by the CIA that he had authorized under that Harry Truman had created. Harry Truman himself said that if he'd have known what they were going to do with it, he wouldn't have signed off on it. Now, when you fast forward to now and realize that we've been putting up with this National Security Act of 1947 since that time and all of the abuses that have flown from it, I think it's time to reconsider the idea of whether it was ever constitutional in the first place. Because it is that law that they are going to turn to, George, when you say you can't use Five Eyes in the United States. You can't bring in foreign intelligence officers. And then they're going to say, well, yes, I can, because guess why? National security. Why is national security important here? Because Belt and Road. Belt and Road is a national security project of the United States. And if we don't win our fight to get our part of it, or whatever we're fighting for, you know, the secret stuff that's going on that you know so much about, if we don't win this, then it's back to the Stone Age for United States economy, because we don't have the people, we don't have the infrastructure anymore, we don't have any way to sustain our leadership in the world. And that is one of the big themes of my show, is George F. Kennan's pronouncement back in the early 50s that, hey, we are way ahead of the rest of the world, and we have got to sustain our domination of the rest of the world, and we can't pull any punches, we cannot be sympathetic, we cannot, in other words, be humane as we do it. So this type of inhumane action that is carried on by the folks with the helicopters and the strokes and the secret armies and the wolves and all of the ones that you've described so well, this stuff is a matter of national security. And if they are able to pull it off, then this country is no longer a free country. So does this election give us a chance to get the Supreme Court to finally invalidate the CIA, in other words, to achieve President Kennedy's goal in the first place of splintering it, casting it to the winds, as a lot of people might think is a good idea right now. Anyway, you see, the big idea that I'm saying is, yeah, it's against the law, but so's the National Security Act against the law, but they do it anyway, and how are you going to stop it?
Doctor, I'll let you go and have the first back.
My gosh, it's a Gordian knot. And to mix metaphors, I'm looking for the catharsis. I think all Americans are. We're trying to figure out how we're going to work through this impasse. And one of the major problems is that we have the so-called fourth estate, as I think Edmund Burke called it. The fourth estate has become the fifth column. And fifth column means an internal group of disloyals that are under the employee of a foreign power. And it's never been that. I mean, it really has come to the fore. I mean, it's exposed itself as being really under the guidance of people like El Ingeniero Carlos Slim Helú of Mexico, right? That's the New York Times, right? And who knows who's behind him? Vatican? I don't know. Could be the Levantine, Lebanese, Maronite Christian mafia. Who knows? But the fact is that we have legacy media, which is really calling the election and deciding who the president is. This is well, it's not unprecedented, but the degree to which they have come forth and exposed their anti-constitutional, illegal probably, and perhaps even treasonous behavior, that is unprecedented. And I think that's probably where the attack should be mounted against the legitimacy of the New York Times, Newsweek, CNN, and AP.
I agree.
I think that's a good broadside. That's good for starters right there. John, I just hope that these lawsuits are in a box in such a way that they don't have to consider the broad sweep of all these National Security Act and so forth. And I hope that we can evaluate them on their own merits, these lawsuits, and say, hey, if you've been dead since 1850, you really don't get to vote. We're not protecting your rights because you're dead, right? And if you are voting in the place of somebody who did vote, who didn't want their vote changed, and you changed their vote, then that's not right either. And therefore, we need a recounting, small box here, no national security involved. We need a recounting of these votes in Michigan. You can't have 130,000 or 138,000 votes in Wayne County, which are recasting Trump votes in Wayne County. And then you flip Michigan. If you flip Michigan, that's 14, 15 electoral votes. Georgia goes Trump's way, 14 electoral votes. Pennsylvania flips, and that's 20. Now Trump wins. So this is Bush v. Gore, right? Mm-hmm. And the person who thought they were winning loses. In Bush v. Gore, we didn't get into national security. We didn't get into these other machinations. So I think you're right, John, that the people that are being employed by the Peter Strzok's of the world to come in and do national security operations are going to still go scot-free. But one would hope that the box is small enough that we can determine what should have happened in Michigan, what should have happened in Pennsylvania, what should have happened in Georgia, and then let the chips fall where they may. I think the chips are going to be in Trump's favor. And then we have a chance going forward to deal with things like the National Security Act. If you don't have that and you just have Biden with a rubber stamp of the NSA, then we're screwed. It's like Hillary Clinton being elected. You're not going to ever have an accounting again.
Agreed. George, did I hear you correctly? You're willing to wait 6 months until this is resolved?
I think 6 months is a long time. These mechanisms are designed to be resolved in a couple of days. Mm-hmm. What I have to do in a court, if I'm the judge, is I have to put the candidates in the position of where they should have been at the close of business on election day. And I have to push out any votes that came in after, no matter how valid they are. If there were 1 minute, it's sort of like shooting a basketball after the buzzer goes off. If they're 1 minute after the buzzer, that's too bad. And I have to do an accurate accounting. I don't think that's going to take 6 months. I think it should take maybe a week or two. Like I said, Bush v. Gore, with all the chads and everything, was 37 days. Most of that was legal. I think we can get this done in 30 days.
So this will be within the window prior to the inauguration that's already scheduled. You're thinking?
Yeah.
January 20th, I believe.
Yeah, and like John always said, don't give me argument, give me precedent. And if you give me precedent, it's a lot easier for the American people to understand. Hey, we did this once before with Bush v. Gore.
I see.
Yeah, and it was 37 days. Al Gore thought he was president for 37 days.
Mm-hmm.
Well, George, as usual, I like your analysis very much, and I'm happy to go along with your ideas. That is a great distinction to make between getting the right result now and keeping it in a small box, as opposed to looking at that huge issue that really is my big agenda, is to try to pull these tentacles out of our society for good. But it's one step at a time, and like I've been saying for so long, we've got to have President Trump reelected. You just said it yourself. The darkness of a Biden administration is just too dark for me to bear.
Now there are signs, though, that the American, at least a large number of them, of Americans, are coming to the fore and putting bodies on the line there, traveling to different locations, including supposedly there's a big demo this Saturday in D.C. Now that sends a strong message, and that's something that even legacy media is not going to be able to discount. So it's really, again, devolving upon the will of the American people, as opposed to appealing to elected officials or this muckety muck or another. It's really on us, it seems.
Yeah, and I'm coming back on Saturday, and I'll be Eddie Ads is going to be covering that, and I'll be interviewing people after it's over. I'm going to be getting a little bit after that. It's not so much the demonstration, which I really do appreciate people coming out and demonstrating. It's affidavits. If you really look at these affidavits, and for every point of law, for every thing in the complaint in Michigan, there's 20 affidavits behind it. It's not one guy talking about one post-it note saying one guy asked me as a supervisor at USPS to backdate ballots. It's 20 affidavits saying I left the TCF Center at 3 o'clock when they told me the poll was closed. And then I heard that they started counting after the red Ferrari came in at 3:45, and I got a cup of coffee and I knocked on the door to go back in, and I was locked out. That is, I don't know how a judge looks at that and says that these people are not telling the truth. And I saw 20 affidavits behind every one of those violations. And this is what I didn't see, to be honest with you, in the Pennsylvania. There was one guy with one post-it note, and one supervisor said, we want you to backdate. So they said it was hearsay. So there was a lot of hearsay strike-downs in the Pennsylvania case because it was one anecdotal thing here, one anecdotal thing here. And the strength of the Michigan case that I finally saw was this weight and gravity of all these affidavits coming in to prove the points of law. So I feel very good about Michigan. That's only 14 votes. It's nip and tuck in Georgia, I know, so that's 14 votes. Pennsylvania is more of something that could be argued, with all these different voting systems and so forth. That's 20. But there's a lot of things a lot of balls are still in the air here. And I think Biden needs to step back and say, hey, wait a minute, I could be at Al Gore here. Mm-hmm. This thing is not determined. You can't fill up the basket after the buzzer rings. That's just not going to work. So I think it's worth the country waiting the 30 days to do a proper accounting rather than a rush to judgment to coronate somebody who doesn't deserve to be president.
Mm-hmm. Remember the 1969 NBA Finals when Jack Kent Cooke put the balloons up in the rafters of the Fabulous Forum? Yep. Joe Biden and his group might find themselves in the position of having to put the balloons back up into the rafters one by one Now that's a sight to behold. I'm waiting for that.
Wow. Well, if I remember, that was the New York Knicks that won that. Um, am I wrong?
It was
Is
the
that
Celtics, Red Auerbach.
okay? Maybe I'm thinking of '68 with the DeBusschere from the jumper from the corner. But I think the point's well taken that celebrating too early is embarrassing, and Hillary certainly had the glass ceiling balloons. And we have to remind everybody that Al Gore had 37 days of sunshine and balloons, where he thought he was the president of the United States, and he wasn't.
And remember how Boston won. They won ugly. Don Nelson hit that shot. It bounced way up off the rim and it fell right back in.
Yeah,
W. Let's go for the W, ladies and gentlemen, as in Webb.
yeah, yeah. Well, you're saying you can win ugly, and winning ugly is okay.
Yeah.
So I like that. Yeah, that makes me feel good. Trump, I think, if you look at the incredible number of votes, 9 million more votes than he supposedly had in 2016, that's an amazing number. The fact that Joe Biden would get 10 million more votes than Barack Obama it just on the very face of it just flies in the face of any kind of sniff test. Like Obama had a lot of enthusiasm behind him and Joe Biden had none. So it's like there was just some kind of manufacturing process, some kind of printer from the sky that was just printing millions of votes. And it was a military operation that was run against Trump. I mean, that's just the bottom line. It's a NATO operation run out of Canada that was run against Trump. Look at the people that are involved here. They're all for the Iran nuclear deal. They're looking for 2 more $150 billion payouts. NATO is looking for its $300 billion a year from America. And they have every incentive to run an operation against Trump. So the American people shouldn't be surprised that NATO has decided once again, to run an operation against the non-NATO candidate. It doesn't surprise me.
Mm-hmm.
People just don't see it in those terms. That the people of this country are still into Republican versus Democrat, and that's about as far as they can see anymore. It's like their brains have been turned into Manichaean, good, bad, blue, red, yes, no, digital switches, and once they've switched their switch, they're not going to change it. That's an effect that we've suffered through our entire lives, just seeing our education system turn into a training system instead of teaching kids how to think. Well, to think, is necessary to be a good citizen, and you guys are some of the great thinkers that I know. I appreciate it every week to have you guys join us here at McDuff Channel. The last question for you, George. Do you think that Trump has benefited from any of our agencies, such as the NSA? Is there any evidence that you can see that maybe the NSA is on Trump's side as opposed to whatever the DIA might be or the military intelligence might be that's running this op? Do you think it's all bad for Trump, all the intelligence agencies?
Yeah.
Wow.
But we had 17 intelligence agencies, John, agree with Donnie O'Sullivan of CNN, saying that the Russians tried to hack the elections for Trump. Things that we know on the face of it, small children would blurt out in laughter, right? That somehow Trump had conspired with the Russians. But we had 17 intelligence agencies all agree with Donnie O'Sullivan and the producers at CNN that that's what happened. On the face of it, just ridiculous, right? And the fact that anyone takes these networks seriously or intelligence agencies seriously is beyond my comprehension. So I don't think anything has changed. It's just gotten worse. And we need a wholesale account. I mean, as long as Gina Haspel is running the CIA, She's the one who did the Steele dossier. I mean, you just can't believe it. Christopher Wray, the guy who looked the other way on Enron. I mean, these are people that are still in power. So, and then all the other ones typically follow behind those two bellwethers. I just find it, if you don't have Trump, and for all his faults, you don't have an accounting, you don't have any kind of chain of command, nothing that our states that should be there.
Well, if he wins it, he's win it against all 17 of them then, and that's an incredible achievement. And you've been a great part of it, I think, George. Everybody that's been working with you and so hard up there at Neighborhood News Studio. And I think they've got a big show that they're preparing to get started in about 60 seconds or so. So,
Okay.
So Professor Hamamoto, let's give you the last word tonight, and then I think I'm going to wrap it up so we can all defer to the guys at Neighborhood News Studio who have a big interview they've been preparing for 9 o'clock. Professor?
Yes, I wanted to thank George Webb and his associates for putting their feet on the ground there and pounding the pavement, and John for keeping the torch of liberty lit and glowing brightly. Thank you both, gentlemen. And on to victory. We're going to win ugly, but we're going to win.
All right.
I love it. Thanks, John.
All right,
Thanks,
George.
Good
All
night.
right, Professor. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night.